everyone. Welcome to Parasitology. Today, we will discuss about the introduction of parasitology. In our discussion, we will be using the Parasitology and Integrated Approach book by Alan Gunn and Sarah J. Pitt. This picture will show us on how parasitology is important in life because one can form a close relationship with a tapeworm. All animals are in constant interaction with other organisms. These interactions can be divided into two basic types: intraspecific interactions and interspecific interactions. Intraspecific interactions are those that occur between organisms of the same species. They range between relatively loose associations, such as those between members of a flock of sheep, to highly complex interactions, such as those seen in colonial invertebrates. For example, the adult stage of certain jellyfish may appear to be a single organism, but it is actually composed of colonies of genetically identical but polymorphic individuals. These colonies divide labor between themselves in a similar manner to that of organ systems within a non-colonial organism. For example, some colonies are specialized for reproduction while others are specialized for feeding. Interspecific interactions are those that take place between different species of organism, as in this figure. As with intraspecific interactions, the degree of associations can vary between being extremely loose to highly complex. Odum classified these interactions on the basis of their effect on population growth using the codes plus, which is equals to positive effect, minus, which means negative effect, and 0, which means no effect. This leads to 6 possible combinations, and these 2 can be broken down into further subdivisions. Some authors also include a consideration of the direction and extent of any physiological and biochemical interactions between the two organisms. A wide range of terms have been suggested in an attempt to compartmentalize these interactions, but these are merely convenient tags and they cannot be defined absolutely. Let's take a look at the different interactions of organisms. The term symbiosis is usually translated as living together and is derived from the Greek word syn, meaning with, and biosis, meaning life. It was originally used in 1879 by Heinrich Anton de Paris to define a relationship of any two organisms living in close association, commonly one living in or on the body of the other. According to this original definition, symbiosis covers an extremely wide range of relationships. Strictly speaking, a symbiont is any organism involved in a symbiotic relationship. However, the vast majority of scientists tend to restrict the term to an organism that lives within or upon another organism and provides it with some form of benefit, usually nutritional. The association is therefore referred to as a host symbiont relationship, and the majority of symbionts are microorganisms such as bacteria, algae, or protozoa. Where the symbiont occurs within the body of its host, it is referred to as an endosymbiont, while those attached to the outside are referred to as ectosymbionts. Leeches are extremely useful in modern medicine, particularly to aid wound drainage following plastic surgery, but one of the risks associated with the application of leeches, as seen in the picture, is that the patient acquires an Aeromonas infection. These infections are often trivial, but they can become serious and lead to the formation of an abscess or cellulitis. This is a difficult problem to solve because the symbiotic bacteria are essential for the leeches. The term commensalism is derived from the Latin word commensalis and means at the same table together. Most definitions indicate that one species benefits from the association and the other is unharmed. The concept of harm within any definition leads to complications because it may be difficult to measure and depends upon the circumstances. Similarly, a benefit may not be immediately apparent, and it is possible that some of the associations that are commonly cited as commensal involve a degree of benefit to both parties, albeit they may not benefit to the same extent. A commensal association may be facultative, in which both species are able to live independently of one another, or obligatory, in which one of the associates must live in association with its partner. For example, in many of the warmer parts of the world, the cattle egret or Bulbocus ibis is often observed riding on the back of cattle and big game from which it swoops down periodically to catch lizards and insects that are disturbed as it rides moves through the undergrowth. The egret is perfectly capable of living apart from the cattle, but it benefits from its mobile vantage point computer. The egrets are not thought to remove many ectoparasites from the cattle, and they get their Arabic name Abu Kirdan, father of ticks, from the large number of ticks associated with their nesting colonies. The cattle therefore appear to gain little from the relationship, although it is likely that the egret acts as an early warning system of the approach of predators. When we talk about forests, it is usually described as one in which one species provides shelter, support, or transport for another organism of a different species. For example, apart from the first instar, the larvae and pupae of the black fly Simulium nieve attach themselves to the outer surface of freshwater crabs. The larvae feed by filtering out phytoplankton and detritus from the water, and the crabs acts as a suitable firm yet mobile substrate on which to attach. An appreciation of this association is important because adult Simulium nieve are important vectors of the Oncorcera volvulus, the nematode that causes the disease river blindness. Forests may be a temporary or permanent, and this picture shows an interaction of organisms. Mutualism came from the Greek word mutus meaning reciprocal. These relationships are those in which both species benefit from the association in terms of their growth and survival. The association between Wolbachia bacteria and the filarial nematode Onchocerca volvulus is clearly mutualistic. The bacteria are confined to the cells of the reproductive tissues and hypodermis of the female worms. The Wolbachia provide metabolites which are demonstrably essential to the worms. If the bacteria are removed, for example, by exposure to the antibiotic tetracycline, the worms are unable to establish themselves in their host and grow, and in case of adult worms, the female is rendered infertile. When we talk about parasitism, it refers to the close relationship in which one organism, the parasite, is dependent on another organism, the host, feeding at its expense during the whole or part of its life. It is frequently a highly specific relationship that always involves a degree of metabolic dependence of the parasite upon its host and often, though not always, results in measurable harm to the host. The association is usually prolonged, and although it may be ultimately result in the death of the host, this is not usually the case. It is therefore distinct from predation, in which a predator usually kills and consumes its prey within a short period of time. Some organisms are obligate parasites, and at a particular stage in their life, they have to live as parasites of their host, while others are facultative parasites and can develop as parasites or free-living organisms depending upon the circumstances they find themselves in. For example, the larvae of the warblefly Hypoderma bovis are to develop as parasites of cattle and are therefore obligate parasites. Also, by contrast, the larvae of the blowfly Lucilla sericata are facultative parasites because they are able to develop as parasites should the eggs be laid upon a live sheep, or as a free-living detritivores if the eggs are laid on a dead sheep. Parasite host is a term used to define the organism on or in which the parasite attaches and from which it derives its nutrition. The host is usually not related taxonomically to the parasite, although this is not always the case. Most parasites are highly host-specific and only infect one host species or a group of closely related species. This is due to the complex adaptations the parasite is required to evolve in order to identify, invade, and survive within their host. For example, the nematode Ascaris sum is primarily the parasite of pigs, while Ascaris lumbricoides is primarily a parasite of humans. A few parasite species, however, are able to exploit a wide range of hosts. For example, the protozoan parasite Toxoplasma gondii is capable of infecting, growing, and asexually reproducing in virtually all warm-blooded vertebrates, although sexual reproduction only takes place within the small intestine of cats. Hosts can be divided into classes depending upon the role they play in the parasite's life cycle. The definitive or final host is the one in or on which the parasite reaches maturity and undergoes sexual reproduction, while the intermediate host is the one in which the parasite undergoes its developmental stage. There may be just one or several intermediate hosts, and the parasite may or may not undergo a sexual reproduction during this time, but it cannot develop into an adult or reproduce sexually. In this way, a parasite can exploit its host for maximum effect by combining the reproductive power of asexual reproduction in the larval stage with the advantages of sexual reproduction during the adult stage. The concept of harm. The term harm is often used when describing interactions between organisms, but is particularly pertinent to the description of parasitism. Unfortunately, harm is a difficult term to define and is not always easy to measure. For example, parasites are usually much smaller than their hosts, and a single parasite may have such a minor impact that it cannot be measured in terms of its effects on the physiology and well-being of the host. By contrast, a large number of these small parasites could lead to serious illness or even death. Similarly, a low parasite burden may have little impact upon a healthy, well-nourished adult host, but the same number of parasites infecting an unhealthy, starving young host may prove fatal. Because parasites live within or upon their hosts, they have a reduced need to maintain body surfaces and behaviors that protect them from desiccation, heat, cold, because this is done by the host. Similarly, the parasite is to a large extent protected from predators and pathogens, which would have to overcome the host's immune system before locating the parasite. Even ectoparasites are protected to some extent because hosts are not always able to distinguish between a predator that is attempting to take a bite out of them from one that is intent on removing a flea or louse. A parasite will be transported wherever the host goes, and therefore the limits of its dispersal depend upon the dispersal powers of its host, coupled with whatever other special needs the parasite has to complete its life cycle. Consequently, a parasite does not have to devote energy to dispersal. If the benefits are so enormous, this therefore begs the questions why there are not more highly specialized parasites and why parasitism tends to be extremely common among some groups of organisms but rare among others. For example, there are comparatively few parasitic higher plants, Lepidoptera, or vertebrates. So, In this table, this is the summary of advantages and disadvantages associated with the parasitic lifestyle of a certain organism. Here is the list of summary of factors contributing to the problems of parasitic diseases, one of which is poverty, and all others go along with the first. That is all for the first part, or the introduction of parasitology. See you in the next session. Thank you and stay safe, everyone.